On a recent trip to Sacramento, California, I had the great pleasure of meeting and training with Guro Brown, who specializes in Eskrima and Wing Chun style Kung Fu. I asked him for an interview, which he gracefully allowed, and I hope you find him as insightful as I did. Hey everyone, this is Chris Kennedy again. Today I'm with Guro Brown of Long Shadow Martial Arts, is that correct?
Yeah.
And I just had my first Eskrima lesson. It was really interesting. I showed up, not really sure what to expect. I told them I didn't have any shoes. They trained shoes here, just in my flip-flops. I didn't have my mouth guard or anything with me, so that's perfectly fine. And even better, and I had a really great training experience. Guro Brown, thank you for letting me come train with you, by the way. It's been interesting and very new. So I've noticed that training with you, that your martial arts philosophy is a lot different than most other martial arts schools. You train, it seems, more for survival than anything else. How long have you been training martial arts, out of curiosity?
I started when I was 15, so I'm 42 now, so what was it, 25, 27?
Yeah. When you started training martial arts, did you begin with this same kind of mentality? Like were your first original instructors more of a survival
mentality?
mentality?
Like I told you earlier, I was a skinny, tall, red-headed stepchild named Gurney, so you're a target at that point. If the other kids are better fed and they're stronger and they're being jerks, your idea is, I don't want him to knock my teeth out because that's his intent. It's funny to him.
So that was the goal from the beginning?
Yeah, it was the goal, to not lose my teeth to somebody's punch.
Have you ever trained any like ringside arts or nothing like that?
I was never politically correct enough to be able to function there. Well, the idea is that to get into that, you have to make someone want to accept you in there. And that being the promoter. He's the guy who makes the money. You're the cannon fodder. I was never nice enough. I couldn't bring myself to submit. You're a jerk. Get out of here. We don't even want to deal with you. And so, no. It was never my thing.
So what made you ultimately decide to stick with Eskrima?
Well, I do Eskrima and Wing Chun.
Wing Chun's the other big one.
Yeah.
Right.
Because when I was 25, I met a kid who was about 150 pounds. He was maybe 5'9". And I was a pretty strong kid at the time. And here was this little guy, and he said, I wouldn't want you to hit me. You look like a gorilla, but you're too big to move. So we went to the gym, and I was repping 310 on the bench press. I'm squatting at 60. And I'm laughing at him because he was struggling with 150 pounds. And he says, okay, well, give me a week to not be sore, and then we'll work out my way. And so we're working out, and I set up, and I go to hit him, right?
Okay.
You throw a punch, and he goes, wow, I thought you were strong, man. That was all he did.
Huh.
But his hand went to me. So it created this slip, this wedge. And he was still lined up on me from his center line. He said, here, go ahead and kick me. So as he brought his leg up like I showed you earlier, he stepped into me and I fell over. If I let you kick me, you'd probably break my ribs, but I'm allergic to broken ribs, so I'm not going to let you kick me. And then we started doing something called cheese-up. He takes my arms here, and he says, just move in. And as I moved in, he went, boom! Whoa. But he did it hard. And so this little 150-pound kid took me at 190 strong and bounced me off an entertainment center because I couldn't, just like you couldn't bring your arms in to stop that.
Right.
I had the same problem. And he did it 3 times. And I said, okay, I'm convinced. And it was the science of what he did. It wasn't that he had more power than me. It was that he understood the physical geometry of the body and how to not let the stronger guy hit him. And that was what convinced me. Plus, like every American kid, I was impressed with Bruce Lee's fast hands and how he baffled people with his BS. Meaning, well, I'll just say that outright. Like I showed you earlier with his 1-inch punch that you talked about. If you stand there, I'm not going to hit you, but
okay.
The idea is that you see him perform it 2 ways. He's like this,
okay,
and he leans in. So if my hand goes back here, I'm not doing a 1-inch punch. We'll call that, 8 to 10 inches.
Okay.
If I start here and I do the other one he did, which is a Wing Chun turn stance punch, and he turns his body in, boom, same thing. So then when I learned that idea, like I showed you earlier, if I'm here, I come back to here, there, oh, wow, so it's real. Because I never believed in this. I mean, we all, because the kids I hung out with understood if you were strong, you threw your body into something, the guy was going to move.
Right.
So I'm like, yeah, it's just kind of martial arts showy stuff that we see a lot of. The guy that, like the guy that bends the spear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's because he's applying pressure down and creating the bend. If they you keep the spear straight, it's going through you. End of story. End of story. It's all about directional pressure. So that, I'm like, hey, I finally found a Wing Chun guy that knew what he was talking about, and here he was younger than me too, and smaller than me, and whack, and I'm like, I'm convinced. And then I got shoulder injuries, and then I got a back injury, and then I really couldn't do a lot of the other things that people normally do because my injuries precluded me from the ability to do that.
That was another question I had. You talked about your back injuries and shoulder injuries earlier. How have you adjusted your training, basically to work with these past injuries? How has it affected your training? I'm guessing you said you still have back problems.
Everything. I still have shoulder problems. This AC joint, actually, the gristle is grinding, so I'm bone to bone. This one's where I showed you how the shoulder moves in the collar.
Yeah.
Well, that's because they had already cut that one out. I'm an inch narrower on my left side. So how I do that is that, as we talked earlier, if I maintain my structure just enough that I'm not trying to overpower you, but I'm not allowing myself to collapse, and you press in, I still maintain the same structure.
I see.
And I'm allowing myself to turn. I'm allowing actually you to turn me, so you now make my technique, whether it's from a Wing Chun standpoint or an Eskrima standpoint. It's more about me receiving your pressure, but not trying to fight it and become static, like we talked about earlier. If I do the triangle, right, and you hit me, I'm static, so that I'm still taking that pressure. But if you move to me and I go, and I move, our pressures will negate.
I see.
And if you then continue to overwhelm me, what if I just follow your pressure? And then move into you? Because it's going to exhaust itself at some point. You're going to lose the ability, either through structure or through energy, to continue that pressure. So if I just follow it and allow you to move me and then I move in, whether it's with a hand or with a knife, you have less precursors on what to read. You know, if I'm doing this resisting, you know what to do. Because you're pressing actually over there.
Right.
But there's nobody over there to hurt you, so you should be pressing to me.
Oh. Simple.
We get programmed to overcompensate. If it's this kind of pressure and I go, because I'm trying to press it away, now we have this power game.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Right? But if I'm pressing here, just press to me. To me. So here, well, just keep this in hand. Just keep this structure.
Okay.
Turn your body.
That is interesting.
Okay, so if I'm pressing like this and you just step forward and turn your body, you can't, by virtue of your structure that I've just shown you, I can't overpower it with just this because I'm only using these muscles.
I see.
You just used all of these muscles. The entirety of your body is what makes everything. It's the multiplier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it definitely does. So has your strong Wing Chun background affected your Eskrima?
Absolutely. There are guys who have other parent systems. Karate, Kempo, that's a variation of karate. There are grapplers who do it as well. Those are ways of thinking that we talked about earlier. So because I've had to settle into not fighting pressure, but receiving it and flowing with it to create this opening in this moment. As soon as you turn, that creates that opening. So my idea is less sport and, as you said earlier, and more about survival. So the idea of the stick. So now, if we think about, say, tournament Eskrima guys.
Okay.
Bang, 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 bang. You won. So if he trains this way, over and over and over and over and over, suddenly somebody's being harassed on the street and he's got a broken pool cue. And he comes in and he doesn't think my gun. There's that potential. So I don't train for the potential of how many headshots can I take with my helmet because I never wear a helmet?
Mm.
You know, and as we talked about this idea of if you overswing and I go, because you now have this massive hole here.
Yeah.
But if you swing to this point and I deflect and you come in, bang, because you haven't overreached.
I see.
So it's I don't know if it's, Wing Chun has given me structure. Life has given me conceptual ideas. Grandmaster Latosa has done a great deal of fine-tuning with that. I spent 17 years with him Mostepe. And we parted for family reasons per se, family politics. That we'll leave it at that. So there's a structural idea, there's a conceptual idea, like we talked about earlier, the difference between the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys. The closer they are to the Gracie line, the more they flow, and the less lug-headed it is. And the farther away you get, it's more about powerful, and I'm going to force you to tap out as opposed to acknowledging where you feel this bite. Well, if you're here and do as I told you, really fall forward. Now fall forward, step back, and lift the elbow. Like, okay, so.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like this.
Yep. Because you've fallen, and now I'm thinking to myself, gosh, I really need to control it. Oh, I'm going to push him to the ground, right? And now, as you lift the elbow again, because my pressure is going here.
Right.
For me to follow you back up, I now have to change directions completely and try and follow you. Now, I can. This is my. But the other guy isn't going to do that. And in time, say, set this down. If you do that arm lock at speed, go ahead and do it at speed. In speed, it becomes scary.
Yeah.
Because this is my target now. It's not, how can the judge, rate me and give me a point for my trophy? This kid's strong. If he gets me, I'm done. The next grappler is scary if I play with him in his arena. I don't want to play with a grappler in a grappler's arena because I'm not a grappler. I want to lead him in. If he gets me, that's remedial, meaning I haven't done my job in the first place. If he gets me, I want to lead him in and give him something like false confidence so he creates an opening himself. Because I'm not going to be able to create it once he's got me.
I see.
That makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. So your opinion of Eskrima tournaments is, I guess, unrealistic?
Any tournaments. It doesn't mean that, and I said this earlier, sport people train hard. They probably train 3 or 4 times harder than reality people because they have to go in there for however many rounds. The rounds 1 to 5 minutes long. You've got 1 to 3 rounds, maybe 15 rounds if you're a boxer. A lot of those guys train really, really hard. You can't not respect that. That being said, the normal person doesn't do that. So the normal person has to rely on those nasty, dirty tricks. So
yeah.
I'm not going to take power head on if I don't have that power. I'm going to go for his eyeballs if I have to, his throat, or how can I diffuse that pressure like we talked about earlier so that maybe instead of trying to do this cool lock here, I try and put a short rib through the lung. And then close ground to hit him in the throat so that I can go home and spend time with people I care about. Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
So it's not about system, it's about concept. The Wing Chun and the Eskrima for me are mechanics that have worked for me. And then the concept behind that has tuned those mechanics for my body because I'm not going to pick something up and lift it by virtue of my spine. My shoulders being messed up, like I showed you earlier. If I'm swinging like this with a velocity fist, well then it's way out here and it's not backed by my body.
I see, yeah. So I see how your style is different from other styles. Makes a lot of sense. But how is Eskrima in general different from other martial arts? Now I know there's like hundreds of martial arts out there, so you can't really.
And there's a lot of
specifics.
Eskrimas. The idea of Eskrima is about killing the opponent that's trying to kill you. So if people see us train with these sticks all the time, the stick represents a blade. So if I'm hitting you with a blade like this, how are you going to survive?
not.
Because you're not, because I'm headed for here, which means that everything in between this point and this point, if I've transmitted my power correctly, is now separated. So it's a combative martial art. In fact, most martial arts are combative, hence the word martial. It's not debate art, it's martial arts. We dumb them down for tournaments to keep people in good condition so that they can perform again. If people die, nobody can perform. When there's no tournament, there's no entertainment, nobody has money.
Do you feel like the Eskrima tournaments and martial arts tournaments in general are kind of a corruption? Do you think they've corrupted the martial arts world at all?
I think that people corrupt, not the tournaments themselves. If these guys are doing their tournaments, right?
Right.
Just move a little bit like I showed you earlier.
Okay.
If you stay static, and I hit you here, and I don't complete through, then who's corrupt? Me, because
yeah, you can go through.
I'm co-signing. I'm playing the same game. Look at me, I'm the Grandmaster of BS. Okay? But it doesn't mean, if you look at it from a perspective of how do I deal with this pressure at speed, as we did earlier. So just do ones and twos, okay? Give yourself distance so the stick will hit you.
Yeah.
You feel how it's coming back?
Yeah, I do. It's great.
So the idea of step back a little more. This idea of how do I deal with this pressure at speed, okay? How do you do it? Speed. Hit to me.
Okay, yeah.
Don't chase it. It's the moment you chase the stick. So this is the problem with them, is that they start chasing the stick. If you chase the stick and I hang my stick out over here, and I'm chasing you, so it's a training mentality. And as soon as they hit each other in the head with the stick, acknowledge that that's a kill shot. Because you can explode a watermelon or a head with a stick. That's the reality of it. So it's the entertainment idea, I believe, that's the corruption.
I see.
It's the way that's related. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have use, because people start learning, hey, to deliver power in motion. So it's a good thing if it's done with the right idea in mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Is there any sort of ranking system in Eskrima? Like they have belts in Japanese arts and stuff?
Yeah, but they're not necessarily belts. They're student levels. At least within my system. I can't speak for the other ones.
Okay.
I can only speak that Renee Latosa has been my only Eskrima teacher. And within the Latosa system, there's 12 student grades. And there's 6 technician grades. So there's no need for, I'm a 10th degree Dan, Master of Almightiness, and whatever. When you reach 6, you're a master. So
okay.
They're numbered. I haven't noticed a lot of colors, per se.
But there is a ranking system.
There is a ranking system now. Renee Latosa tells me that when Angel was teaching him, Angel Cabalas, he was the first one to teach it commercially. Angel walked around his school with a cigarette in his mouth. And there was no ranking system. You were either good or you weren't. It was pretty free. Towards the latter portion, as he got more commercialized, trying to build his business and give people what they wanted.
I see.
He started giving them something to brag about, because look at my level.
Yeah.
I have my certificate and I was there pictured. My level's higher than your level. You must respect me. Well, what if that lower guy's better than the upper guy? That's the way it used to be. And as I understand it in the islands, that's the way it was. You were either good or you were not good. As it's become more commercialized, these levels have come into play for the purpose of business.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I look up Eskrima, the word Kali pops up a lot. Is that the same thing as Eskrima?
There are a lot of different types of Eskrima.
Okay.
As I understood it, there were 12 families that made 10 different systems. So there's Kali, Sarada, and it goes on. There's different variations based on the exposure they have. The Dutch went into the Philippines and beat them up for years. The Spanish went in there. The Japanese went in there. A lot of the European countries went to the Philippines and picked on them and robbed their resources. So yes, Kali is one of the things that come up. Sarada is one of the things that come up.
I see.
They're all variations of the same thing, which is Philippine martial arts.
Okay, cool. Do you have any idols or inspirational people who you try to model your training after?
I don't do that anymore.
Not anymore?
I found that if you have a hero, and suddenly your hero becomes human, and suddenly now we're all human.
Mm.
Also, the hero worship, I think, is a bad thing for the person that's the focal point of that, because they can get too personally elevated and not be as good of a person or a teacher. So I don't participate with that.
Okay.
Like I did once upon a time. So no.
Okay.
I mean, I respect my teachers, but I don't.
But no idols or anything.
No.
I hear you. Okay. And finally, for any inexperienced martial artists out there or aspiring martial artists out there, do you have any words of advice?
Train. Talk less, train more. If you don't know, don't pretend. That's a big one. Find a good teacher who's not going to give you a bunch of marketing, someone who's going to teach you how to stay safe out there, because like we talked about earlier, all your sport training, if it doesn't work out there, it could just get you hurt because you don't know what the other guy brings to the table. You know, think that you have to live in the world, so it has to be applicable in the world. That's my best advice for anybody.
Perfect. Guro Brown, thank you so much. It's been absolutely great meeting you guys and getting a lesson from you. Appreciate it. You're welcome. I just got done talking with Gurney Brown, Long Shadow Martial Arts. He is a Eskrima and Wing Chun instructor, and I just had a very interesting lesson with him. He is definitely more of a martial artist who trains for real life situations rather than for sports. He had a lot of knowledge to share with me, for which I was really grateful. Some people I'll go to and talk to and they don't open up a whole lot. When I started talking to him on camera, as you saw, he didn't have a whole lot to say. I think the camera makes some people slightly uncomfortable, or they're just not sure what I'm going to want on, what I'm going to want to post. So they're just trying to kind of answer my questions and not expound too much. But every single time I turn off the camera and thank them for the interview, they always seem to expound. He did the same thing, just like every other interview I've had, and I really like it because they teach me a lot of things that I wish all of you guys could learn, because they're honestly invaluable things. One of the things he talked about after the camera turned off was how the martial arts that he teaches really transfer over into your non-combat life. He says he teaches his students martial arts largely so that they can more easily cope with their lives. They can easily cope with their co-workers and their family and their spouses and whatever else and wherever else they are. He also talked about the need to avoid things that look fancy, or rather avoid doing things for the sake of looking fancy. He talked about visiting another Eskrima teacher one day, and the Eskrima teacher had some very fancy disarms, and he told the Eskrima teacher that those would never work in real life. And I don't know if you gathered this from the interview with Guro Brown, but he's kind of a more straightforward guy. He's not going to beat around the bush and try to hint at what he's thinking. He would just come out and tell you what he's thinking. That's the impression that I got from him anyway. And he said that when he visited this other Eskrima teacher, he told him that the disarms that he was teaching would never work in real life. And the guy said, well, yes, of course they would. And he said, how confident are you? And he pulled out a little 3-inch blade, a little 3-inch pocket knife. He said, would you be confident enough to have me, allow me to try to stab you? And the guy said, no, of course not. And he said, okay, what if I just use like a ballpoint pen? And the guy wouldn't let him do it still. This other Eskrima teacher was in front of some of his students as well. And Guro Brown was telling him, was basically calling him out in front of his students, and he wouldn't do it. Guro Brown just made the point to me that you don't want to look too flashy for the sake of looking flashy. You don't want to try to look cool for the sake of looking cool. You want to be practical with your fighting skills. If it happens to look cool, awesome. If not, it doesn't really matter because your goal isn't to look good. Your goal is to return home safely. And I've met other martial arts instructors with this same attitude, of course. And I think they are more on par with what martial arts originally were. Nowadays, I think they're done largely for entertainment, for fitness, for fun. But that is not his goal. His goal is not fitness or fun. He did point out that good health, you know, is a side effect, and that often it is fun, but you don't train for those reasons. You train so that you can return home safely. He also pointed out, because I told him that I was a grappler, that even though it's true, you know what they say, that a lot of fights might go to the ground, even though most may go to the ground, 100% of fights start standing. He said something interesting, that grappling moves, he said, should be done not with the intent to control, but with the intent to damage, so that a fight can be finished. To evidence this, he said, if you were a skilled grappler and went to the ground, but you were on the ground where there had previously been blood, vomit, feces, maybe there's needles, maybe there's a lot of gravel that's going to cut open your skin, you could potentially contract a disease or a sickness just by having your skin opened up on the rough gravel. You don't want to go to the ground with the guy, even if you can control him and he's not hurting you or punching you or poking your eyes or anything. But while you're on the ground holding him and controlling him, your back gets all scraped up or your knees get scraped to the bone just because you're on this rough gravel. Yeah, maybe you controlled the guy, but it still feels like you lost the fight. So his philosophy is much different than any other philosophies I've ever encountered. They make a lot of sense though, and I'm really grateful that I was able to go visit him. Shout out to Guro Brown for letting me come by and train with him for free. That was really nice of you. If I'm ever in town again, I'd love to come by. If I'm ever in town again for an extended amount of time, I'd love to buy some of your time and have you train me for a month or so. Shout out to my Uncle John. He's the guy who set me up with this Guro Brown. I was in town and my Uncle John knew that I like to research martial arts styles, and I haven't done any research on any Filipino martial arts styles yet, though I would like to. So my Uncle John set me up with him, so thank you big time, Uncle